our own. We have one of our own group members sharing with us today, and his name is Ron E. So without further ado, please come on in, Ron.
All right, good morning. I'm in recovery from alcoholism. My name's Ron, here, of course, because alcohol kicked my ass. And the message that was carried to me is you never have to take another drink again as long as you live, if that's what you want. Pretty simple. I kind of missed it. I remember this old guy saying that all the time. His name was Al White. And he said that every time he shared. And so when he passed on, that's the kind of stuff that has to live on. So Bruce is responsible for this, I think. So he threw me under the bus. So you guys can blame him. I hate being blamed. Anyway, I told you that. And so my sobriety date, September 16th of 1990. So I've been sober 31 years. There's probably still money out on me. I would have bet against me, that's for sure. I came in pretty damaged goods. I didn't know that. I probably, if I'd known what I had to face, I probably would have turned around and left. That's some of us have that experience. It's kind of dark, and I didn't know. I was damaged. When I got sober. My best friend since I was like about 6 or 7 years old, this kid that I went to elementary school with and stuff, I hadn't seen him in years, and I got sober and I saw him in a restaurant and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, I found out that I'm an alcoholic and I've destroyed my life, and he said, "Ron," he said, "you were always on the dark side." And so I didn't understand that, but that was the impression that I put out there. That would happen in my lifetime over and over again. This trauma that I grew up with, it's kind of good and bad. I really had 6 lives. I've lived 6 different lives, and you can see right where they break. And so part of my story is I had this father who drank, and so when I was younger, I liked music and rock and roll and the Grateful Dead. And so I used a lot of drugs because I didn't want to be a drunk like my dad. And my fond memories of childhood is when I get big enough, I'm kicking his ass. You know what I mean? And no kid should have to take what I did. And he just didn't beat me for nothing. I was kind of a rotten, evil little sucker. And I got in a lot of trouble. And so I got a lot of lickings. And that's what we called them back then. Today, people are put in jail for beating their kids like that, but there was kids that got it worse. You know what I mean? So that's just the way it works. And then on the other side of it, my mother is Native American, and what we didn't know, I was born, I was raised in the city, kind of, out in San Bernardino, Riverside area, just 60 miles east of LA, and it was kind of an orange grove, but there were cities, and they just called my mom a Canadian, and nobody's really said she was an Indian. And so there was this thing that I found out once I got sober. It's called generational trauma that happens with Native Americans, the killing of them. I know what it is today after going to some Native American conventions and listening to the stories. That I know the kind of stuff that was experienced on my mom's side. And so that kind of is a dark cloud that hovers in there that I was kind of unaware of. And so that's my childhood. And while my childhood, that first place in my life, I spent a lot of time out in the hills with my bicycle. You know what I mean? We had this little hill that we call it Blue Mountain. And I probably pushed my bicycle up there every day after school and twice on Saturday and Sunday, and then race down that thing, because I was kind of an adrenaline junkie, and so I would later race motocross, and I loved Japanese super bikes, and I loved to do wheelies, and that was one of the places I could go to escape all of this stuff, like drinking allowed me to do. But early on, there was a lot of other escapes, and so my story is simple. About 16. I was actually 15, but around I started drinking like that summer of my sophomore year. But it was only on weekends until I was 18, and then I became a daily drinker. But that first time, three of us got a half a gallon of Spinata, and I got my share of it. And then I got sick, and I threw up, and I passed out, and I awoke with a terrific hangover. And while I enjoyed what booze did, I was an adrenaline junkie anyway. I didn't like being sick, and I didn't like the hangover, and so I swore I would never do that again. I don't think I ever drank Spinata again. It left a bad taste in my mouth. But shortly thereafter, I thought I'll try beer. It might be different. And of course, my standard story is real simple. I was a puker and a quitter. I would always start drinking, overshoot the mark, get sick, and then the next day I was swearing off, and I quit hundreds of times. Some people never did. My wife, she's sober a long time. She never quit. But I was one of those who was always swearing off. And it ended up that I had this, I was telling my ex-wife, jobs, the police department, I was telling everybody, I promise I'm going to show up to work. I promise I'm going to stop drinking. And then I'll only drink beer, because when I got to AA, I thought that drinking beer was like a temperance drink. I thought that wasn't really drinking, because that's kind of the way it is for me. So I'm in my second life now when I'm started drinking and using. I'm a teenager, and I find rock and roll, and I spend 10 years just going crazy. There was a gang of us that ran around, and we would go to the beach and surf. We would go to the river and take LSD and wander around, and it's just go to the mountains and just, go skiing. We just did whatever we wanted to. And I got a girlfriend along the way. I never thought that would happen. And when I was about 24, so now I'm going to go into my third life. She said she wanted to have kids or she was going to leave. And I was never one of those people that they say that they take hostages. I was always more like a Velcro. I kind of just stuck to them. You know what I mean? I couldn't. It's really sad. I was a mama's boy, and there's a whole story into there, and a lot of inventory work on that. And maybe I'll get to a little bit of that later. But so I decided, I'm real willful, real strong-willed, and I changed my ways. I got a regular job, right? I quit selling drugs and running around, and I got a regular job. We bought a house, and we had 2 kids, and I worked really hard at trying to bring a paycheck home and do the right thing. And so when my kids were 5 and 8, then that marriage was over. So kind of what my life story is that I grew up in this drunken brawl, right? That ended in a divorce. That's my parents got divorced, and I came out of that mess. And I grew up and I created the same mess that I came out of. It's just patterned right there for me. And I was not able to see that, right, until I would get sober and begin to look at it introspectively through some inventory. And I was just I was mad. I was really mad. I'd like to tell you I saw the error of my ways, right? But I didn't. The job, I had a really good job at this time. I got a good job, and I called it the rotten job. I didn't like that job, and I didn't like the people at that job, but it was a good paying job, and so they finally came down on me. A lot of stories in there, like I got hired in there. I was in aerospace, and I'm a hard worker, right? Like I would go to work and outperform everybody and leave wondering why I don't feel like they look, right? Because they're happy and there's something wrong with me. So that's kind of my MO all my life. There seemed to be something wrong with me. I was different. I never felt, I always felt different all my life. And so for the first 9 years I worked in aerospace, the boss I had, he knew that about me, and he knew if I showed up that he was going to make his quota. And so he was happy to put up with my bullshit because I was a hard worker. And so he kept my attendance card in his desk, and the industrial relations, right? They never knew about me. There was 5,000 guys in this building building airplane parts. And so I was kind of lost in the mix. And then when he retired, then it came out, then my attendance card showed up, and then the company got on me, and they fired me. Basically, they said, we're tired of your shit. We can see it, and we're not putting up with it anymore. So they sent me to treatment, and this would become my fourth life. I got sent to treatment, and AA came to the treatment center. I got sober in traditional AA, and I didn't know good from bad. I didn't particularly like it, and like I think I said it yesterday. My experience is that I was new, and this guy came up to me and pointed himself my sponsor, at least temporary, he said, until I could get some help. And then he started calling me, and he taught me or showed me how to save my life by his actions. And so that's been the influence in AA. And so I kind of didn't really like AA, but I didn't know where else to go. I was worried about keeping this job, and I had these kids that I was taking care of, because that's the other thing. My ex-wife, when she ran off, she left those two kids in my care. And so I can tell you that the big part of my story is that when I got sober, my little girls were 8 and 10 years old. And the 10-year-old was setting the alarm, and she was waking me up in the morning, and she was saying, "Daddy, are you going to go to work today?" Because Daddy was drunk. And so I had damaged goods on my hands with my kids. And I could see that once I got sober. I could see that terror, and they were just worried about their security and stuff. And I could see that once I got sober. And then I realized later that what I was looking at was me when I was a little kid. So that's the damage. Okay. And both of those kids, both of those girls, they got a different dad. They saw how men act in Alcoholics Anonymous, because it was different. I don't know how different it was, but in the 90s, it was a simpler AA to me. It didn't seem so rigid. They allowed me to believe whatever I wanted. They said, you don't have to believe. They said, take what you want, leave the rest. They were very welcoming and open. You know what I mean? I walked into my first meeting. I had my two little girls, one in each hand, and the women came, and they got my girls, and they set them in the corner and gave them coloring books. And they set me in the meeting and gave me coffee and said, you listen. That's the AA I showed up into. It was very warm. And so I forgot where I was going with that. Sometimes I get mixed up. I don't have like a canned pitch. It's whatever I'm feeling at the time. I'm real visceral, then that's what comes out. And so I got, I'm dealing with this AA, and I don't really understand, but I tried to do it their way. They said, take what you want, leave the rest. And so I tried praying. That's the most phony I've ever felt in my life, was when I was on. I don't even think I even tried it on my knees, I'm pretty sure. And because I wanted relief. I wanted relief from this stuff. And this guy was my sponsor, that saved my life, that showed me how to save my life. He kept telling me that I was going to have to write this inventory. I'd get drunk, and that's what it says in the big book, And I read the big book. I probably read. I'm a reader, so I tried to read myself sober. I read chapter 4. No, not. I read chapter 4 a bunch, but chapter 5 on the inventory process to write the 4-step. I read chapter 5 100 times before I wrote the inventory. And what it basically says in there is that I'm selfish, self-centered, driven by 100 forms: fear, self-deception, self-seeking, self-pity, which Dick would say that's 25 of each. And you can read that all day long, but it doesn't go in. I can't apply it until I wrote the inventory, actually. And I was 11 months. I was about 9 months. I was 11 months when I did my 5th step. That's just the way it was for me. I was 9 months, and I was just dry as a popcorn fart. And I just hated my life, and I hated AA, and I hated work, and I hated my ex-wife, and I just have all of this hate. And and I've always been one of those that swallowed it. So I was depressive. I was depressed all the time because, and I realized later because I was concerned about what you thought about me, right? I had this image that I needed people to like me somehow. This, anyway, that's a whole psychological thing that I had to deal with. But I, I I just can't stand it anymore. And so I get this idea and I said to myself, I says, well, you know what? I'll write the rotten inventory and then I'll do the rotten fifth step. And then I'll just go drink because I know it won't work. You know, it can't possibly work. I didn't believe it would work. I didn't think it would work. I didn't think any of it was in my best interest. And so that's the good news, is that it doesn't matter. Nothing really matters. The only thing that matters is action. If you do something, you'll get some results. And that's what I didn't, that's what I couldn't grasp. That's what I couldn't understand. And so I did this fifth step and I had like an awakening. I had this huge relief for me. And I didn't have to, I wasn't thirsty anymore, is the way I would put it. And before that, I was thirsty all the time. I was just like looking for relief somehow. And this inventory was just a huge thing for me. And basically it was, the simple part of it is that I was so mad at my ex-wife, and that's the first thing I wrote down. I wrote down some superlatives. I won't say what they were and what I called her. And then I said, I hate her guts because she cheated on me and ran off with another man. The only way I could express all of that anger that was in me. And my sponsor looked at me and he said, gee, Ron, she probably feels real bad about that. And man, I wanted to hit him, you know, because I was, you know, that was my MO, is size things up. And if it wasn't going my way, we fight, you know what I mean? And so I just looked at him and I couldn't believe it. And then he says, what about you, Ron? Did you cheat on her? And I'm thinking to myself, the hell is he talking about? And then he presses the issue, you know, just like in the commercial. Well, did you? And I think to myself, well, not until she cheated on me, right? Because everything in about me was all about rationalization and justification. I could justify a fucking axe murder, you know, just the way it is. And he goes, and that was the big change in my life. I was able to see selfishness and self-centeredness. Her part, my part is that I needed to be able to say, this is over. I'm going to go over here, right? But I couldn't, right? I snuck around behind her back just like she was me. So I didn't act like a what you'd call a normal human being. And then that's what changed my life. I was able to see that what my part in the deal was, you know. And so, I forgot, I was talking about my girls. That just came back to me. So those two girls, they saw a different dad. They saw how men act. They saw how women act in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they saw how men treat women, right? And none of that was going on in the family that I grew up in. And so both of those girls, they grew up and they picked out nice guys. And I don't have any understanding of why that is any different one way or the other, but I think the example had something to do with that. And so alcoholism seems to have stopped, at least with my kids. I don't know whether they maybe have it or not. My youngest one seems to be that way, but she doesn't drink. She does exercise. And now they have families and they're working. And they didn't seem to go the way that I did. And I only have AA to thank for that. So the hope is in Alcoholics Anonymous that the family dynamic can change and that this doesn't have to go on, whereas it went on from my family and my parents' family. You know, that change is so great. So the I kind of in Alcoholics Anonymous, so that's the first great lesson I learned. Okay, is that I would have told you I would have told you I felt different all my life. And when we looked at that in the inventory, what that came out as is that different is a thinking and different is not a feeling. So different is a comparative word. That means I'm using my mind compare how I feel or think I feel against how you look. That's the way I spent most of my life, not unaware that it's not necessarily wrong or bad, but unaware that that's not getting me anywhere other than it's keeping me down. That's the first great thing I learned in my entire life. And so the second great thing I learned in my entire life, there's only really three things I learned. The second great thing that I learned in my entire life was I was 2 years, 11 months at this time, dry again, after a great experience with the steps and wanting to believe, pretending to believe, doing all of this stuff. I went to general service, H&I started working, doing commitments, doing those kinds of things in AA that many of us did. And I got this huge resentment against my sponsor, this guy that saved my life. And I didn't really understand what a resentment is. I couldn't have told you that for me, resentment means to re-feel something. That means that just keeps coming up, right? And so I don't lose the experience or put it beyond me, right? So I'm 2 years, 11 months, just crazy, just mad. I'm ready to drink. As far as I know, I don't know what to do. And that's when I called up this old timer, and that was Toothpick Dick. And he would be my third sponsor. My second sponsor, I watched, he hurt his back and he had what I wanted. He was my service sponsor in general service. And his name was Randy, and he hurt his back. He was a nurse. He got educated in AA. He had it all. He had a nice house, a car, he had everything. And so he had what I wanted, because that's the way I look at things. They have what I want. And he hurt his back and he got on pills and he got addicted to them. And that took him out. And he started drinking, and the fucker died right in front of my eyes. And there was nothing I could do about it. It was a really, really hard experience. So my third sponsor was Dick, and I didn't know he was going to be my sponsor. I called him up and told him I have this. I didn't tell him about the resentment. I said, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to drink. And I asked him if he would sponsor me. And this is the kind of old time AA there was. Dick goes, oh, I would be wonderful. And he says to me on the phone, he says, why don't you write me a 90 item gratitude list and call me tomorrow at 5. And the fucker hung up the phone. I couldn't believe it. I was like, imagine a hornet when we used to catch them in a jar and then we shake it up and that hornet would go bzzz. I was so mad. I couldn't take it. And so I was thinking, screw him, screw AA, screw everything. And about 4 o'clock the next day, I'm just scribbling on a piece of paper, and later I would ask Dick, I said, why'd you ever sponsor me? And Dick says, nobody ever called, right? So that's how he would ward off newcomers. If he would give them this assignment and tell them to call tomorrow, and nobody would ever call. So apparently only the really sick ones called, because everybody Dick sponsored seemed to be really sick. And I guess that's a good thing, you know what I mean? It makes us a little bit motivated. And so I started in with some new inventory on Dick. And one of the greatest inventories I took was that he had me do this exercise where he wanted me to write down everything that people said about me, like when I was growing up. The things were like my parents said that the big one was that all my life, my mom told me that she thought twice about ever having another kid after me, because I was such a rotten kid. I was just a mess when I was teething, right? Just screaming and yelling all the time. She said they put whiskey on my gums and that whole shebang, right? And let's see, I better shut up here pretty quick. So I'm going to get to the third thing that I ever learned, and I learned it early on in AA, and I would later understand it. So when I was new and I was angry, and so my fourth life was when I moved to the mountains, and I ended up retiring, became a skier, and my sixth life was when I moved here to LA 8 years ago, and then I've been with you guys pretty much ever since. But this third thing, that the most important thing I ever learned in my life, I was pretty new. And this is before my inventory, and I was within the first few months. And there was this guy in my group, his name was Brian Hester, and he had 2 little girls, and they were about the same age as mine. And this guy was fighting with everything he had to be able to have custody every other weekend of his kids, right? And here I was pissed off because I got to go to the rotten job, bring the rotten check home, to pay the rotten rent and feed the rotten kids, because that's the way I looked at it. And this guy is like just loving his weekends with his kids, and he just rents a room and he can't take his kids to the house. So he comes over to my house for a couple of years, every other weekend. And we just fixed Hamburger Helper, fed the kids played, and he would sit and talk with me about the book and stuff. And what happened is that I began to care about this guy, and my heart went out and I wished him the best without looking to get something out of the deal. And then I felt good about myself. And that was the lesson that in life, that the simplest thing that we need to learn is that all my life I was looking to get something out of the deal. I was looking for an angle. And once I stopped doing that, so that's why I go to H&I, because I never want to go there. I don't want to go to jail. It's awful. Anyway, but I go there on a regular basis because there's new people there that need to hear the message. And when I leave, I feel good every single time. It never fails. And so there is some selfishness there that I begin these kinds of actions. So that's really the three things that I learned. So life is much simpler than my mind will make it. I don't know what else too much to say. I will say that I love you, most of you. There's some people that I've learned that, right? Because when I was new in AA, I didn't like hardly anybody, and then I began to care about Brian. So it's been a long road. Thanks for letting me share.